Hello everybody, I'm James. I'm here with Callum, who is our miniature painter, and he's going to show me some of these awesome new Fallout figures from Modiphius, which you've kind of been working on a bit in work time, but then you've been progressing in your spare time.
I've enjoyed them so much, I did them in my free time as well.
Yes, so which one do you want to look at first? What we're going to check out?
I think we'll probably start with Mr. Sunshine over here.
So Callum, who, what, or indeed where is a Mr. Sunshine?
Well, Mr. Sunshine is an enigma.
Clearly,
in reality, he is one of the new Protectron workers from Modiphius. In the Fallout universe, they're kind of assistants, workers, cheap robot labour.
Right, so in language that you, and probably our audience better understands, they're like C-3PO, but not as much of a shiny dick.
Yeah, he's pretty much a weathered dick instead.
How rude!
Okay, so Mr. Sunshine, he's actually quite a small figure. He's not too big.
32mm scale, but they are still quite small.
Yes, definitely small. But you've packed a ton of detail on, and a lot of things to look at on this figure, with some interesting techniques that you've maybe pushed on this model.
I did really push them here. I've been watching a lot of Sergio Calvo's airbrushing videos, just seeing his process, how he works through a model, thinning in the cup with water and airbrush thinner before the paint even goes in. That was really informative.
Yeah, and is that more how you've got these graduated tones on the underside and little like nuances of colour and shade?
So I normally would just airbrush at the start and then go to the brush. Watching Sergio Calvo, I realised I could come back to the airbrush and use it to kind of subtly transition, get a bit of weathering, kind of dampen some of the details, use it to enhance the contrast. It really was an experience for me getting to, tackle this model.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've kind of gone back in and added another layer with your weathering and your freehand little effects on there.
Yep, again, bouncing back and forth with the airbrush. I put it down, took the brush back out, there's some rusting, a bit more chipping. I wanted to use that layer of weathering to really tie some freehand down onto the model.
And then another nice little touch you've added is the lighting effect that you've put on the hands.
Yeah, so a key with the miniatures, you want to draw the eye, and an easy way of doing that is with triangles. So as you can see, we've got two hands pointing to the top of almost the point of the smiley face. It was a subtle kind of object source lighting. The key really with believable object source lighting is not having the glow extend too far across the model and having the centre, the light, be the brightest point of it.
Yeah, for sure. You don't ever want the glow that's being cast to be brighter than the actual light source because it will look completely uncanny.
It just throws it for your eye.
Yeah. Yeah, it works really well.
Thanks. So the next model is another Protectron worker. This one was actually inspired by the Nuka-Cola bottle caps. I met the lovely folks at Modiphius at the UK Games Expo, and I stole these from them. They weren't even looking. I just nicked them. But as you can see, we've mimicked the effect, the logo on there. I wanted to match the colour a little bit, but as I've weathered it, it's kind of muted it slightly. But I think it was a pretty good job.
So one of the things that you found from sharing this is you're getting a question if you use decals and stuff.
I see that a lot, and it is all freehand. I can see why. I'm pretty insane. I get why you would use a decal for this kind of thing.
But you'd have to make your own decal.
You would. I've seen a few people doing custom ones.
Yes, but this is freehand, and then you've taken the extra bold step of once you've done quite detailed freehand, to then cover it with weathering and chipping and grime.
So as we've briefly talked about, the key to effective freehand is tying it into the model, and a way to do that is through the weathering, because once it's unified across the entire piece, it looks like it belongs on there.
Yeah, for sure, and this does. I mean, the hyper detailing of the little chipping you've done on here is maybe a little bit absurd.
This one's probably an evolution further from Mr. Sunshine, and I watched a few videos from Night Shift, who's more of a scale modeler, but the weathering tips that he had on I think it's 4 easy tips, was really useful in getting very fine, believable, hyper-realistic, as you say, so that when you get those massive close-ups, it looks just like a robot that's been wandering around for 200 years.
But you're also going to add a few more details?
I think there's a few things I want to do with the hands, and I want to show off a little bit more weathering on the back. I think it's a bit muted at the moment, and needs a bit more on there. So
well, that sounds like an opportunity for this video.
It does sound a bit like an opportunity.
Okay, so we'll do a bit of that, but obviously Callum's inspired by another video, so make sure you check out Night Shift's video as well. We'll link that in the description.
It will level up your weathering.
Yes, so we'll do that in a sec, but just before we get to that, we'll just quickly look at these other work in progress figures you've got. All right, and from very mechanical hard surface stuff to something quite soft and organic here, a lot bigger as well.
A lot bigger.
This is some mutated monster?
This is a Deathclaw matriarch.
Okay. Oh yeah, so it's got little eggs there as
yeah,
well.
she's guarding her brood here, but I think the Deathclaw matriarch is like a leveled up version of a standard Deathclaw. So
right.
A bit of more of a challenge, different kind of scheme as well.
Yeah, for sure. You've done some really nice like tonal shifts across the fleshy bits and all the undersides there.
So I started with an airbrush and then applied a dry brush, and then I used some glazes to knock those down and basically focus some points of light here and, you know, on the arms and that.
Oh yeah, so that's quite similar actually to my approach for big figures. I did it on an Archon Studios dragon recently with speed paints.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe Joe can kind of drop that in and show my dragon, which is not as good as Callum's.
But then we've got our last final model to show off here. This one is a Child of Atom. It's one of the newest releases from Modiphius as well.
Yeah, and a hyper realistic figure.
The scale on these 32mm models is really great. It means that the face is very small and very hard to access.
Yeah, because it's real scale rather than heroic, isn't it?
Yes.
So everything's actually anatomically correct.
Yeah. So from what I could find online of these characters, they had quite tattered clothes, very muted colours, kind of earthy. So I used a few glazes to kind of illustrate the patchwork nature of the cloth.
Yeah, I think the cloth's interesting, but for me, I think it's the face really that catches the attention with this one, because it is teeny tiny, and we'll make sure Joe, when he shows the close-ups of this, gives some indicators of just how small this figure is. How did you go about doing that?
So I started with the airbrush. I undersprayed with a purpley kind of brown colour, and then went top down with some flesh to basically brighten it up. And it was just a lot of glazes, to be honest, very subtle hints of light. They're going to be illuminated by that radioactive can next to them. So I've tried to have it bright enough that we could have just little catches underneath of the green.
Sure. And did you use a magnifier to get those details? Like you've got some tones on the lips. Have you even done the eyes?
I have done the eyes, but they're with more of a skin tone for the actual eyeball, and it's a brown for the recessed socket because I wanted it to be a bit more subdued because they are so small.
Sure. I mean, the fact that I had to ask, have you done the eyes, shows just how small this is, because I genuinely can't tell. It looks kind of like it, but with my eyesight...
I don't paint with a magnifying glass, but I use it to check at the end.
Right. Well, you've done a really great job on that, Callum, and that is a very realistic, not Furiosa that you've created.
Yes, it was on my mind for sure. The shaved head, it's a bit stippling, some glazers just to tie it in, but it does evoke that kind of...
It certainly does. But enough of her. Back onto this one, we'll pass that to you.
Thank you.
And you can go and start doing some weathering on the back of it.
Grab your brushes.
So, when you're applying chipping like this, the first trick is to apply your brighter colour first, your highlight colour in essence, and then we can cut that back with a darker colour later. So I'm going to be using Citadel Mephiston Red and Citadel Luganeth Orange. I think that's how you say it. Again, I'm using my wet palette because we want to keep these mixes ready to go because we're going to jump back and forward with them. If you haven't got a wet palette, I really recommend it. So I'll get a little bit of the Mephiston Red on my palette there, clean off my brush, and then we'll just add some Luganeth Orange as well. So, we've got these on here, but now we need to work out our method of application. For this, we're going to be using some sponge. This just is backing from a pack of metal models that I got. So we're going to tear this corner off here, just gently. We want a smallish piece. But as you'll see, the point here is it's like 90 degrees. It's not going to look good when we stab it onto the model. So what you want to do is go round and just tear erratically just little bits off because we want to create an uneven surface. Try not to tear away too much of it. You just want small little pieces coming off. The kind of foam you get as packing is quite high density. I think it's good for this. It holds together quite well, so you can get little bits off like that without tearing the whole thing apart. So I've got quite a nice irregular little surface here. Just testing it here with my fingers. I think that's quite nice. Now you can hold these with a little bit, some tweezers, but I'm just going to bunch it up between my fingers and apply it just like that. Get all this out of here. Righty, so now we need to mix our highlight colour. Just get an old brush for this, and you'll do. And I'll see, does this match what I've got before? I'm just going to check it here. And hold it up to the model. It needs a bit more, I think. There we go, much better. Clean off my brush. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm going to spread it out a little bit because I need some area to get my foam into. And I'm going to ball it up, get ready, and we're going to jab it into the paint here. Fairly roughly, we want to collect a little bit. Now, we're going to start stabbing it onto a piece of paper or your finger. You basically want to use it so that you can see how much you're applying. I'm going to use this to demonstrate just how much you want. So we're still, too much is coming off here, it's going to flood the model, it will ruin the effect we're going for. So we want to be very careful, you hardly want any speckles coming through. So that's the kind of level you want. You can hardly see it on camera. You really want it to be subtle. And then I'm just going to start jabbing it onto the model here. So I'm going to focus on this area. Try not to move, try to push it down and lift off. If you push and twist, you might end up with streaks that don't really look natural. So that's it. In and out, firm, quick, jabbing motions.
Title of your sex tape.
What is happening right now?
So there you go, we built up a little texture there on the inner panel. I'm going to come back and apply a bit more. The only downside to this method is because we have so much little paint on the actual sponge itself, it will dry very quickly, so you will have to keep reapplying. But it's worth the pain. Less is more with weathering. You want to build this up steadily. So there, I'm pretty happy with what we've got. As you can see, we've just got a little bit of texturing here. It's subtle, but we're going to enhance that now. So what you do is, you get a nice fine tip brush. I've got my Kolinsky Sable size 2 out. And we really want to establish some of the bigger speckles. We want to join some of them together. We're essentially going to build up this effect so you can see it more visually. So this is why we've got the wet palette, because our mix is still just ready to go. I want to add a little bit more water to it, because what we really want to be doing here is we just want to be lightly tapping the brush against the model. We want to basically check you're not overloaded. I'm doing it on my thumb here, and we're just gently gonna tap against the model, just like this. You can see I'm using my fingers and my hands to brace the model and brace myself against the model, because I want to make sure I don't push too hard into it and create a splodge that's not going to look very natural. You want to control the distance you're applying at. So with this braced method, I can just tilt forward gently and just catch the model. Now, we also want all the scratches to collect at the edges, because this is the point that will catch the most weathering. It also forms like a rudimentary edge highlight for you, so it's really great to just do that. I'm doing it with a brush, very small scratches, dots, building up that texture. Right, so I'm happy with that. Now we're going to start doing the darker areas. This is essentially where the paint it's scratched and it's also worn through entirely. The little scratches we've done before are just chips. So for this, I'm going to be using Rhinox Hide. This is the actual colour that I've used to underspray the model as well, so it's going to subtly tie it in. If you wanted to do something like that on your model, I'd recommend it, because it helps unify the scheme. So I'm just going to pop some of this on my palette, just over here in the corner. And again, we're going to thin it with water. We don't want it at glaze consistency, we want it just above that, because as you tap your brush to the model, it will flood off of the brush. That's not what we want. We just want small speckles. So again, test it here. I'm going to test it on my thumb. Show you here. Test it, test the stabbing motion. Let's see, it looks pretty good to me. Let's test it on model. So what we want to be doing with this is focusing in the center and to the top of these small speckles, because as light comes down from the top, it would catch the bottom cut, the bottom scratch. So we want to focus towards the top. I splodged a little bit there. Again, use your finger, wipe it off straight away. Because it's quite thin, we can get rid of it. I think I actually need a bit more paint here. There we go. So, you don't want to fill all of the little scratches and dents that you've already got, you just want to do some of them. It won't really sell the effect if they're all, it'll look too perfect, too uniform. Just want it to be a little random. And also you would go around the edge, because that would have worn away the paint entirely there. Rotate your model if you need to. I think we can go a little further. Really draw the bristles to a point. Tap tap. As you can see, I'm braced again. So I'm also going to focus on this section here. This method is very quick because the paint is thin. We can quickly jab a large area. Obviously I'm focusing on two small sections, but you can quickly cover the model. It might seem tedious, but the benefit is really an effective technique. So what we're now going to show you is another method of adding another layer to this weathering. So building weathering up in layers is what creates a believable result. So I'm going to apply some Citadel Scrag Brown. I'm going to use this for my rust effect. I normally use this on flat panels. It's quite bright, quite punchy, but if you water it down, it can mute it a little bit, so it's still got some vibrancy, but it doesn't distract from the paint scheme that you've got. So I want this to be quite thin here, maybe a glaze consistency. I'm mixing it with water because I want this to be a watery streak that's run down from a crevice in the model. So I've tested it on my thumb here. We want it that kind of loaded on the brush. We don't want it too heavy because again it'll run away from us. So I'm painting this just in a downward motion as the water would run. I'm going to have it collect on the top panel line here, and it's running towards the bottom panel line, so I'll put a small drop in there. Build this up gradually. We don't want to go too far. It will surprise you when it dries how intense this can be, so we want it to be quite subtle. So I'm going to check here. As you can see, we've got this going downwards. I'm going to catch a little bit more in the recess because that would be the most dense point of rust. I'll just make it a bit further down there. So, looking at it now, I think it may have gone a bit too far. Going to check on my lamp. Yeah, so I think it's a little too intense. It's a bit too thick. I think it's not believable as at scale. So what we're going to do is return to our highlight mix and we're going to cut back into it. Again, another benefit of using that wet palette. So I'm going to just jab a few quick textured points in there just to narrow that stream down. Wash my brush off, and now we're going to return to our darker, eroded metal mix. And we're going to just fill in some of those jabs there. Nice and quick and easy. A lot of people panic when they make mistakes, but really you can fix them quite easily. As you can see here, I'm really happy with the result. And that, in an essence, is nice, quick and easy weathering tips. There you go.
I mean, that looks pretty good to me, Callum. I will never attempt it because it's psychotic to put that much time and effort into a miniature, but it definitely does look good.
You guys should attempt it though.
Yeah, please do. I'm only being facetious for the sake of my comedy role as miserable miserly James. And to prove I'm not a miser, it's time for your payment, Callum.
Excellent.
You've earned at least one Nuka cap there.
Are you sure? Energy bills are going up. Could one more bottle cap?
Right, I'll give you another one. Oh, I think I just heard someone subscribe. Have a third.
Oh!
This video has been brought to you by WiPrime, Wargames Illustrated magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WiPrime by following these links.